Hello and welcome to Midweek Matters. About 2 weeks ago, Pew Research Centre has released a report. It said that during the pandemic, India's poverty has increased and its middle class has shrunk. While pundits can debate on the methodology used to arrive at these conclusions, I want to draw your attention today to the absence of important data in our country and the questionable credibility of data that are available from government agencies. What is alarming is that the government is suspected of suppressing unflattering and inconvenient data, and it is increasingly felt that the country's data systems are subverted by political interference. Pew's report compared India and China. For our purposes, let's leave China out for a while and look at the Indian numbers. Using World Bank's projections made last year and the current situation, Pew concluded that India added 75 million people to the category of poor. In addition, the middle income category in the country shrunk by 32 million. The low income category has contracted by 35 million. Viewed from a global perspective, India contributed 60% of those who fell into poverty worldwide during the pandemic. Of the total people who retreated into middle income category worldwide, again, 60% is contributed by India. These are terrifying developments because, as it is, without the pandemic's help, India is home to 28% of the global poor. Now, if we bring in the comparison with the Chinese figures, we will learn that what happened in India are not inevitable consequences of the pandemic. China managed to add only 1 million to the poor category as against 32 million for India. Its middle income category grew by 30 million instead of shrinking by 35 million as it did in India. We should all ask ourselves, shouldn't we? Why were we not able to stem this tragic slide of large number of people into the hell of poverty? When others could, why couldn't we? The reason, I think, is that we have been in denial. We are reluctant to face up to the reality. Our government was pretending that there was no problem, and by suppressing data, massaging them, it tried to convince people that all was well. And in some cases, by not collecting data, it tried to bury its policy-making head in the sand and convince itself that all was well, and said that all was well in many of our regional languages, even to convince us all. Before the pandemic, the government refused to read the data on falling credit offtake and consumption in both rural and urban areas. It denied the onset of an economic slowdown. And during the pandemic, it never bothered to collect data or tried to estimate the migrant laborers' numbers, lives lost by the frontline workers, including the healthcare professionals, farmer suicides, closure of small and medium enterprises, number of jobs lost, incomes foregone. It refuses even today to come up with figures on how many jobs the Mudra loans have generated. It only puts out the disbursements, with about 90% of the disbursements at 50,000 rupees or below. The number, quality and sustainability of the jobs that they can generate is at best insignificant. Even among those disbursements, State Bank alone reported about 20% NPAs. We do not know for sure how many people vacated the agriculture sector and where did they go from there. What is the progress of the government's initiative of doubling farm income? There are no data. The data that pointed to decline in rural consumption are suppressed. The finding that the wages in rural India have not grown before the pandemic itself is not allowed into the public domain. Data are simply absent. This malafide indifference to data and their unforgivable suppression handicapped the government to do evidence-based formulation of stimulus package and its targeted execution in the aftermath of the pandemic. Inevitably, the overhyped scattergun package did not come up to the rescue of the most vulnerable and needy. It turned out to be an unremarkable and a hollow announcement which was soon forgotten. As a result, we succeeded in adding 60% of those who fell into poverty globally in the wake of the pandemic. The government is unrepentant of this sin. There are no latest data available on poverty in India from the government sources. The last authentic government figures are the 68th round of NSO survey done in 2010-2011. The 75th round was scrapped, and therefore we do not know where we stand in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals, the first and foremost of which is elimination of poverty by 2030. Not far, only 9 years away. The October 2020 World Bank's biennial report, Poverty and Shared Prosperity Report, said that their estimate of global poverty was seriously handicapped because of lack of data from India. The seriousness of indictment is not lost on those who know to read the subtext in the mild but reprimanding language of intergovernmental global organizations. This melody, denial of reality and suppression of data melody, however, has begun to surface when the government junked the figures on employment in 2019. Remember the suppression of periodic labor force survey data? The data have pointed out that the unemployment rate then was at a 4-decade high. The figures were inconvenient to the ruling party that promised to create 10 million jobs. The government cast aspersions on the data collected by its own agency, withheld them from the public, and tried to justify its act by saying that the report needed some more work. Expert members of the Statistical Commission quit in protest, reducing it to a rump commission. Government dodged queries on the unearthing of the so-called black money after the 2016 demonetization. While almost the entire demonetized currency returned, the lost jobs have not. But the government doesn't want to count and doesn't want to reveal to us what it counts. 108 economists and social scientists from around the globe have expressed concern in an open letter over the loss of credibility of the Indian economic data. The scholars felt India's statistical machinery had come under a cloud for being influenced and indeed even controlled by political considerations. They appealed to the government to restore access and integrity to public statistics. India's statistics and data were well known for their robust institutional architecture. Not just third world countries, but the advanced economies too look to Indian practices in collection, analysis, and interpretation of socio-economic data. Sure enough, there were healthy debates and disagreements over methodologies, but never was the integrity of the process in doubt. Never was its impartiality questioned. Never has the government been allowed to interfere. Never before the NSS data release schedule was dictated by the government. Even raw data were put in public domain for researchers to verify and analyze. It's no longer the case. India's data integrity is compromised. Today, Indian corporates, bankers, foreign investors, economic analysts are looking elsewhere for credible and dependable data. They no longer trust government data. Government data on vital indicators such as GDP, inflation, and employment are suspect. Even public sector banks don't fight shy to question the credibility of government data. As recently as July last year, the research group of India's premier state-run bank, the State Bank of India, questioned the government's figure on retail inflation. India's former chief statistician, Pranab Sen, who now heads the Standing Committee on Economic Statistics, said, "Suppression of data and the subsequent leaks have progressively resulted in the demonizing of data and ended up demoralizing the country's statistical system." On the one hand, tech giants are amassing enormous amounts of our personal data. What we do, what we buy, where do we go, what our preferences are. They use them to grab our attention and to manipulate it. And on the other hand, our government doesn't give us access to data vital to our collective lives, so that it can divert our attention and manipulate our political discourse. Both are trying to unilaterally, stealthily, and hastily construct an economic and political future for us without our consent. Both these tendencies need to be combated. The government is readying to mark the Amrutotsav of our independence. It's an occasion to celebrate, to feel proud of the long road we have traveled and the challenges we have overcome, to feel proud of our achievements. But it is also an occasion to take a measure of our continuing challenges, the impediments that we face, and to put our minds together and prepare a roadmap for our journey ahead. Poverty, inequality, unemployment have to be brought back onto our agenda of Amrutotsav discourse. The discourse that doesn't face down at the challenges betrays the government's and our society's lack of self-confidence. For a meaningful discourse, we need data, authentic, credible, dependable data, uninterfered by partisan political considerations, clean data. In order for us to banish poverty, we need to first banish data poverty. That's all we have time for this week. We will meet again next week, Wednesday, lunchtime at 1 o'clock. Stay safe and take good care of yourselves. Until then, bye.